For 3 years, I served the cold-hearted CEO, Li Mingyue, as her contracted personal bodyguard. But now that our contract had finally expired, she somehow refused to let me walk away. She actually wanted to marry me and make me her husband. Then, with an almost shameless confidence, she pulled out a ring. We started out with nothing more than a business arrangement. So she saw no problem with turning that arrangement into a marriage. As for me, I thought she just didn't want to pay what she owed me. 3 years earlier, after I retired from my old line of work, I had nowhere to go. I was broke, wandering the streets when she took me in. The price was simple: become her personal bodyguard for 3 years. It was a straightforward contract. $1 million a year. And another $3 million as a settlement when the contract ended. I did my job without complaint, becoming nothing more than her shadow. All I wanted was to collect my money and disappear. She looked almost offended by the idea, as if money was the last thing she cared about. She claimed that I had saved her life. So in her mind, her life, and apparently her future, belonged with me. Seriously? Our bodyguard contract officially expired yesterday. Right? I had just finished checking the security system around the mansion. Then Li Mingyue's calm voice drifted out from the living room. My heart suddenly sank. Then, almost instantly, a ridiculous surge of excitement rushed through me. I finally understood. She was officially ending our contract. I kept my face completely neutral. But inside, my retirement plans were already going into overdrive. The original contract was crystal clear. Protect her around the clock for 3 years. $1 million a year. Then, once the contract ended, she would pay me another $3 million in settlement money. $6 million in total. That was enough. I could finally retire. I could leave that blood-soaked life behind for good. I'd go back to my hometown, buy a little house, and open a private security studio. I'd sleep until I woke up naturally. Take a job whenever I felt like it. And when I didn't, I'd fish, suck up the sun, and enjoy life. That was my dream retirement. Anything sounded better than surviving one day at a time with a blade hanging over my head. So I simply nodded, keeping my voice calm and neutral. Yes, yesterday. Click. Li Mingyue opened a bottle of red wine. The deep crimson liquid slowly filled the elegant glass. As she poured, she reminded me of the last 3 years. She said my performance had been exceptional. She was very satisfied. We had gone from complete strangers to partners who trusted each other. From partners to people who had faced life and death together. But she believed our business relationship had reached its natural end. It was time to put a final, full stop on it. I immediately nodded. I looked like a prisoner who had just been granted freedom. Exactly. You're absolutely right. She pushed one of the wine glasses across the table toward me. Have a drink. Consider it a celebration of the fact that I was finally free. And a celebration that she no longer needed a shadow following her every step. I didn't hesitate for even a second. I raised the glass and drained it in one shot. Clean, decisive, no regrets. I wanted her to understand one thing clearly. I, Shen Xiao, was not the kind of man who dragged things out after making a decision. I had no attachment whatsoever to this constant life-or-death routine. Not even a little. Besides, the sooner I looked ready to leave, the faster she'd hand over my settlement money. Li Mingyue watched me finish the wine. But unlike me, she only took a tiny sip from hers. Then she put down the glass. Let's go. My heart tightened. Go where? A dozen possibilities flashed through my mind. Maybe, was she planning to drag me somewhere just to find an excuse to deduct money from my final payout? But I didn't dare ask. And I definitely didn't dare refuse. After all, she was still my employer. And she still had my final payment in the palm of her hand. One wrong move, and she could get angry. Then wouldn't all the injuries I had endured over these 3 years be for nothing? So I had no choice but to follow behind her, even though I had no idea what was happening. I got into the car. Maybe I'd simply drunk that wine too quickly. The alcohol was starting to hit me. And after spending the entire day on high alert for my final assignment, my nerves were completely exhausted. I was utterly drained. The car glided smoothly through the city under the cover of night. My eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Before I realized it, I had fallen asleep. When I woke again, it was because Li Mingyue was gently tapping my cheek to wake me. I slowly opened my eyes, still groggy from sleep. Outside the car window stood a massive, solemn-looking building. There was a massive gate in front of us. The national emblem above it gleamed coldly under the lights. We're here already? What are we doing here? I rubbed my aching temples, still struggling to clear my head. Damn, I'm still completely out of it. Li Mingyue's voice sounded strangely casual, as though none of this was unusual. We're at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Make sure you brought your ID. I was still half asleep, so my brain hadn't caught up yet. It automatically filtered out everything she had said. The only thing that registered was, make sure you brought your ID. I instinctively reached into my pocket. Good. My ID was still with me, exactly where I always kept it. Li Mingyue smiled. There was something hidden behind that smile, something I couldn't understand at all. I stumbled out of the car. My head was still heavy and throbbing. That red wine had a serious kick. The after effect was brutal. The Civil Affairs Bureau? Why are we here? Didn't our contract already end? A strange uneasiness stirred inside me, but the alcohol had already dulled my ability to think clearly. I couldn't even be bothered to investigate further. Maybe this was just how rich people did things. Even ending a contract had to come with some ridiculous sense of ceremony, following the staff's instructions. I went through the entire process on autopilot. I signed the documents and gave my fingerprints. Then came the photographs, and I simply followed along. I mechanically obeyed every instruction Li Mingyue gave me. Before I knew it, every step of the process was finished. Then 2 little red booklets, stamped with bold golden characters, were placed in our hands. The moment the red booklet was handed to me, I still hadn't realized just how badly I had been played. I picked up the little red book. I turned it over in my hands. And honestly, the cover felt surprisingly solid. I opened it again, flipping through the pages from front to back. Still, all I could think was, pretty nice quality. Then I stepped outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. A freezing gust of wind slammed directly into my face. I shuddered violently. That lingering haze from the wine was blown away in an instant. And just like that, my brain finally rebooted. I looked down. My eyes landed once again on the red booklet in my hand. This time, every single word printed on it felt like a red-hot brand. They burned straight into my eyes. This wasn't some document proving my Bodyguard contract had ended. It was a marriage certificate. And there it was, a photo of Li Mingyue and me, sitting side by side. She was smiling like a fox that had finally trapped its prey, and I looked like the biggest idiot alive. Beneath the photo were our names, our legal identities. And then I saw it, that enormous red seal stamped across the page in official ink. Marriage. My brain felt like someone had hit it with a steel hammer. Everything went completely blank. That was when I finally understood what was wrong. I snapped my head up. My eyes locked onto Li Mingyue walking ahead of me. For the first time, I shouted her full name with absolutely no restraint. Li Mingyue. My voice was warped by pure shock and fury. It tore through the silent night, sharp enough to stop her in her tracks. She turned around, and somehow, she still wore that same completely unfazed expression. Didn't we sign a Bodyguard employment contract in the first place? I stormed straight toward her. I practically shoved the marriage certificate into her face. If this was an employment contract, then why the hell did we come to the Civil Affairs Bureau? I couldn't stop myself. Every word crashed toward her. She barely reacted to my outburst. Instead, she looked at me with the expression you'd give someone who had just asked the dumbest question imaginable, that looked practically screamed. You really just figured this out? She looked almost amused by my stupidity. Then her answer came down like a blade of frozen steel. Yes, it was an employment contract back then. So naturally, we needed to upgrade it to something permanent. Her tone was so calm. You'd think she was casually commenting on the weather. Who told you we came here to terminate anything? That sentence completely obliterated every fantasy I had about retirement. It felt like I had fallen straight into an icy abyss. From head to toe, I was completely frozen. Marriage? I felt every last bit of emotional control slip out of my hands. For 3 years, I had swallowed my pride and endured everything just to secure that settlement money. And in this one moment, all that patience completely exploded. Didn't our contract already end? Why would you do something like this? Are you trying to get out of paying me? I stared straight at her, furious. Faced with my accusations, Li Mingyue froze for a moment. Then, unbelievably, she looked like my outburst had actually annoyed her. She raised the red marriage certificate in her hand and lightly smacked it against my head. It didn't hurt, but the humiliation, absolutely devastating. Shenjiao, you're seriously such a blockhead. Is money literally the only thing your brain can think about? She looked at me with an expression that was half annoyed and half amused. Do you honestly think I care about that little bit of money? I just stood there, stunned from the hit. All the anger I built up suddenly deflated like a balloon with a hole in it. Every furious word got stuck in my throat. Then, Li Mingyue put away her smile. Her expression became completely serious. She looked directly into my eyes. Over these 3 years, you've saved my life 13 times. You know that. There are far too many people around me who want to use or hurt me. I don't have the energy to gamble on trusting some stranger again. She paused. Then, with an almost matter-of-fact tone, she dropped a sentence that nearly gave me a heart attack. So I'll just choose you. Problem solved. Her explanation was brutally simple. So simple, it almost sounded like she was settling for the most convenient option. But somehow, that made perfect sense to her. I was left standing there in total silence. The reason was absurdly casual, yet somehow painfully genuine. It was so genuine that, for once, I couldn't find a single argument against it. Not one. I was still trying to process this massive bombshell. My mind was a complete mess. Yet somehow, my mouth still went back to the one thing I cared about most. The settlement money. She looked at my hopelessly money-obsessed expression. A helpless but affectionate smile appeared on her face. She looked at me like I was a child who still didn't understand what was going on. She sighed. Yes, of course I'll give it to you. Then she stepped closer to me. She rose onto her toes and leaned toward my ear. Her voice dropped low enough that only the two of us could hear it. Then she casually dropped an even bigger bombshell. Don't worry, my life already belongs to you. So, naturally, my money belongs to you too. Before I could even process that line, I was practically shoved back into the car. I sat there clutching our red marriage certificate in both hands. Its warmth was still lingering against my palm. It felt like a freshly heated piece of metal. A brutal reminder that this was absolutely real. Outside the window, the neon lights streaked past at full speed. And somehow, my thoughts drifted all the way back to 3 years earlier. Back then, I had only just left the military. I was a veteran who had spent years cut off from ordinary society. 8 years in the special forces had left me highly trained. but almost completely useless when it came to living a normal civilian life. I barely knew how to do anything else. My father was seriously ill back home. He needed money for an operation. And one of my brothers in arms had died. His wife and children were left struggling just to survive. I had nowhere left to turn. So I joined a private security company as a field operative. And somehow, my very first job turned into a setup. The client tried to dump the entire mess on me. The police nearly dragged me away. I refused to back down. I had taken the contract and carried out exactly what I was hired to do. Every operation had been properly documented. But the bald client simply folded his arms. He looked me up and down. Documentation? You're just some discharged soldier. What do you even know about proper filing? What proof do you have? The contract says security work. And you're claiming this was trespassing? Kid, don't take yourself too seriously. This world doesn't work according to whoever throws the hardest punch. That arrogant face. I still remember it perfectly. And just when I was about to lose my temper and put him on the floor, a cold, composed female voice came from behind me. What happened here? It was Li Mingyue. She stepped into view wearing an elegant, champagne-colored evening gown. A full team of bodyguards followed behind her. Her presence was so overwhelming that everyone in the room instinctively lowered their eyes. The bald client took one look at her, and all the arrogance draining from his face was honestly satisfying to watch. President Li, it's nothing serious. Just some ignorant security guy making trouble. Li Mingyue didn't even spare him a glance. Her eyes went straight to me. She looked at me and said, "Tell me what happened." I took a deep breath and calmly explained everything from the beginning. Li Mingyue listened without changing her expression. Then she turned toward the bald client. Her eyes became as cold and precise as a surgeon's blade. Call the police, have him taken away. This gentleman was carrying out a legitimate security contract. Any losses caused by this incident will be compensated twice over. My lawyer will be here shortly. The bald client practically collapsed on the spot. And honestly, I was stunned too. So this was what ruthless decision-making looked like when you had real power behind you. That was ice cold. I was preparing to leave with my compensation money when Li Mingyue suddenly stopped me. She handed me a business card. How about a new job? Would you be interested in working for me? 3 years as my personal bodyguard. And my contract boyfriend. I genuinely thought I'd heard her wrong. That was until she brought me to her private club. When I saw the contract waiting on the table, I finally realized she was dead serious. The terms were simple. I would personally protect her safety around the clock. I'd accompany her to important events and handle any trouble that appeared. And in front of outsiders, I'd play the role of her boyfriend. But the part that really caught my attention was the salary. $1 million a year plus another $3 million in a lump sum when the contract ended. My eyes locked onto the compensation section like a heat-seeking missile. 1 million, 3 million, 6 million in total. At that time, I was struggling over every little expense and desperate for even a few thousand more. So to me, this kind of money might as well have fallen straight out of heaven. So what do you think? I swallowed hard. Trying to look completely composed, I said, I need to carefully review all the contract details first. But inside my head, there was only one thought left. Money. Li Mingyue handled the contract boyfriend arrangement with brutal efficiency. Before I knew it, our relationship had been officially announced throughout her social circle. From that moment on, she became the center of my daily life. Actually, scratch that. I became her shadow. Once our arrangement officially began, my entire life changed overnight. I moved into her heavily guarded mansion. That's when I learned what life inside the upper class really looked like. And let me tell you, it wasn't exactly exciting. During those first few days, we only spoke whenever work required it. She didn't ask questions, I didn't pry. The mansion was enormous. Yet somehow, it was quite enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. The awkward silence was almost unbearable, but the contract was clear. I was her personal bodyguard. So eventually, I had no choice but to swallow my pride and start the conversation myself. What's tonight's schedule? Are we going anywhere? She barely looked up at me. Going somewhere? Fine, let's go. To make sure nobody around her could betray her, I started investigating everyone in her inner circle. Her driver, her housekeeper, her business partners, even her relatives. And, surprisingly, I actually found something. One day, I discovered that the bird's nest drink she consumed every morning had been contaminated with a slow-acting poison. I immediately reported my findings to Li Mingyue. For the first time, that normally unreadable face of hers actually showed a genuine emotion. Shock. Shinjiao, you know how to do this too? She checked the analysis report again. Then she nodded, clearly impressed. Not bad. You're more reliable than my private doctor. For some reason, hearing that gave me a tiny sense of pride. Turns out, I could win over a wealthy CEO with actual skills instead of flashy talk. Honestly, this script was getting pretty damn satisfying. And once we became more familiar, she gradually stopped maintaining that perfect CEO mask around me. Her high heels would get kicked off right at the entrance. Her evening gown would end up draped over the back of the sofa. One time, I even found one of her contact lenses abandoned in the bathtub. And I couldn't help wondering, was this really the same ruthless business queen who made her enemies tremble at the mention of the Li family? I quietly followed behind her, cleaning up after her as usual. At the same time, I checked every corner and every blind spot for security risks. Eventually, she simply decided to cut her original bodyguard team in half. She said having just one person was enough. From that point on, the entire mansion's security was basically my responsibility alone. Then one night, she came back from what looked like another brutal banquet. She reeked of alcohol and dropped onto the sofa, rubbing her temples. Shenjiao, come here and massage my head. I drank too much tonight. My hands are pretty strong. I've been training them since my military days. At first, I deliberately kept my movements restrained, but over time, I somehow learned exactly where she was most comfortable. And before I realized it, that invisible boundary between employer and bodyguard had quietly disappeared. But the craziest moment happened late one night. She suddenly woke from a nightmare, screaming. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat. I rushed into her bedroom and pulled her into my arms. Her whole body was trembling. Don't leave. There's someone outside. I gently patted her back. Then I whispered beside her ear, I'm right here. There's no one outside. It took her a long time to calm down before she finally let me go. Then, with her face turning bright red, she looked at me. Shinjiao, could you sleep outside my door tonight? I'm scared. I looked at this woman who is normally ruthless and decisive in the business world. The terrifying CEO who could make countless people panic at the mere mention of her name. Yet right then, she looked like a little girl afraid of the dark. I stayed silent for a moment. Then I nodded. Fine. From that night onward, I started sleeping in the doorway of her bedroom. She never told me to leave, and I never volunteered to move. Somehow, it became an unspoken rule between us. But that peaceful routine didn't last long. An unexpected guest suddenly appeared, and she was about to turn my already high-alert bodyguard life upside down. It started with Li Mingyue's mother. Liu Rian arrived carrying 2 boxes of expensive health supplements. With flawless makeup and perfect manners, she pressed the mansion's doorbell. "Yui, Mom came to see you." I met her at the door, and the look in her eyes made one thing crystal clear. She was Liu Ruyen. "Mrs. Liu, I don't think we're close enough for you to call me family." She smiled warmly, but her eyes moved over me like a poisonous snake inspecting its prey. Then she casually asked, "Why not? Your father may not be around, but who else is going to care about you?" As she spoke, she slipped a thick red envelope into my hand. "So you're Shen Xiao. Young man, you look pretty impressive. Thank you for protecting RUAUA." I stared down at the thick envelope in my hand. My fingertips actually felt cold. This wasn't just a mother visiting her daughter. She was clearly here to test me and figure out what was really going on. A crisis had officially entered the building, and the most immediate threat exploded later, that very night. Liu Ruyen naturally decided to stay in one of the guest rooms. Around midnight, I heard a faint set of footsteps moving through the hallway. My professional instincts kicked in, and I instantly launched myself out of bed. I was on my feet in a heartbeat. A dark figure was trying to turn the handle of Li Mingyue's bedroom door. I moved without making a sound. I locked my arm around the intruder's throat and slammed him against the wall. The guy nearly screamed from the shock. Then I recognized him. It was Liu Ruyen's driver. I only came to bring Madam some warm milk." And sure enough, he was holding a glass of milk. But then I smelled something. Almond. I took the glass from him without changing my expression. Mrs. Liu went to a lot of trouble. "I'll make sure she gets the message." The driver immediately bolted like his life depended on it. The next morning, Li Mingyue stared at the glass of milk after testing revealed it contained almond powder. Her face turned ice cold. "Shen Zhao, we need to move." She stood there, clutching a pillow. Then she blocked the doorway to my room. There was an unusually vulnerable look on her face. Liu Rian isn't going to let this go. She has people stationed outside. This mansion isn't safe anymore. So, starting tonight, you are sleeping in the same room as me. My brain practically short-circuited. Sleep in the same room as you? That wasn't exactly included in our contract. So, this is technically overtime. I was already thinking I should ask for hazard pay, but one look at her face told me not to say a word. "Unless you want both of us to die tonight." That expression killed my argument before I could even finish it. Fine. The settlement money mattered more than my pride. So I reluctantly nodded. And just like that, our little battlefield was upgraded. Li Mingyue's bed was enormous. So soft I could practically disappear into it. Yet I lay there, stiff as a steel beam. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. I stayed rigid at the edge of the mattress, one hand still gripping the weapon hidden beneath my pillow. Meanwhile, the faint jasmine scent from her body drifted through the air. Little by little, it slipped into my nose. I could clearly hear her calm breathing. Right beside my ear. I don't think I've ever been this nervous in my life. I've dealt with ambushes before. But protecting my target from an assassination attempt while sharing her bed? That was the first. At this point, did that count as a workplace injury? Maybe I should negotiate for a little extra compensation. I barely slept that entire night. The next morning, I woke up because I couldn't breathe properly. It felt like someone had dropped a boulder on my chest. I couldn't get enough air. I slowly opened my eyes. And the first thing I saw was a beautiful sleeping face practically filling my entire field of vision. Li Mingyue was wrapped around me like an octopus. Her arms and legs were tangled around my body. One of her legs was even locked tightly across my waist. I froze completely. I carefully tried to move her hand away from my chest. But the second I moved, she made a sleepy little sound and mumbled, "Don't move. You're nice and warm." Then she snuggled even deeper into my arms, tightening her grip. Fine, I'm not moving. I was a professional bodyguard after all. Apparently, my new part-time job was being a human heater. That was still technically good service. Besides, there wasn't exactly anywhere left for me to move. A few days passed like that. At first, my entire body had been locked stiff every night. But eventually, I somehow started getting used to it. Every morning when I woke up, it felt like I was playing a survival game called How to Escape the Octopus Without Waking It. Eventually, I got too lazy to keep escaping, so I just let her hold me. Then, one morning, she woke up before I did. The moment I opened my eyes, I found her staring straight at me with those bright eyes. She glanced down at the position we were sleeping in. And instead of feeling embarrassed, she confidently patted my chest like she'd just discovered premium quality furniture. "Shen Chao, you're seriously comfortable to sleep with, human heater." Then she paused and added, "A human-shaped one, too. I used to have nightmares almost every night. I could never sleep properly, but now that you're here beside me, I sleep like a baby." Watching her look so pleased with herself after stealing my personal space, I honestly had no idea what to say. For once, even my usual comeback completely failed me. Meanwhile, Li Ruyen continued spending her days around the mansion, pretending everything was perfectly normal. She kept preparing all kinds of health supplements for her daughter. As for Li Mingyue and me, we had gone from a strictly professional arrangement with separate rooms to sharing the same bed every night. Like old comrades, that's when I realized just how terrifying habit could be. Without me noticing, it was quietly changing the entire relationship between us. Still, I figured I wasn't losing anything. Or so I thought. Eventually, those days of living like an enemy could strike at any moment finally seemed ready to end. Lu Ruyen finally returned to her own home, acting as though nothing unusual had happened. The mansion returned to its usual quiet atmosphere. But somehow, things no longer felt quite the same. Then, Li Mingyue suddenly suggested, "Let's go out for a while." Officially, it was to clear our minds and avoid any further trouble. But I knew the real reason. She had simply been cooped up too long and wanted some fresh air. Naturally, I had no objections. My salary was still coming in. And now, I even got paid to travel. Honestly, only an idiot would turn down a trip with her. Our first destination was a small coastal city in southern China. And that's when I discovered something. When it came to traveling, Li Mingyue was basically a full-blown adrenaline junkie. The moment she spotted a cliff that looked insanely high, her eyes lit up. She was practically glowing with excitement. "Shen Zhao, I want to try that." I took one look. That cliff was so high that an ordinary person's legs would probably give out before they even reached the edge. No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. There was even a raging drop below, but she refused to listen and insisted on trying. Then she actually stepped onto the platform, looked straight down, and immediately turned pale. She grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my flesh so hard I thought I'd lose circulation. I changed my mind. "I'm not jumping. You'll come up there with me, right?" I stared at her stubborn little face. Then, at the expression that practically screamed, "I don't care what you say." I sighed. And somehow, this exact scene happened again and again throughout our trip. Every time I warned her, she ignored me. Every time she reached the top, she suddenly got cold feet and dragged me back down. Then she found something else that looked tempting. One stretch of ocean looked calm and harmless. Naturally, she wanted to dive in. She only put on a life ring and jumped. Then the current immediately dragged the life ring away. I jumped in without hesitation, grabbed her, and hauled her back out. While she stood there shivering uncontrollably, I looked at her seriously and told her, "There are sharks in these waters. You didn't run into one today because you're insanely lucky." At that point, I'd had enough. I grabbed her and took her straight back. Li Mingyue just stood there, completely stunned. Her mouth hung open for several seconds. Then she stomped her foot in frustration, and somehow started laughing anyway. After that, she stopped trying quite so hard to speedrun her own death, because the woman I thought I knew was completely different from the ruthless CEO I'd seen in boardrooms. On this trip, she was more like a kid seeing the world for the first time. Everything fascinated her. She would spot a stray cat on the side of the road and crouch there, feeding it for ages. Then we'd pass an old man selling candied fruit, and she'd insist on buying a stick. 5 minutes later, her mouth was covered in sugar. She was gritting like an idiot. That carefree, childish version of her was something I'd never seen before. Then we traveled into the dense forests of the Southwest, and once again, she found trouble. She insisted on climbing a wild mountain just to see some supposedly mysterious waterfall. Then we reached the Northwest Desert. She spotted a wild camel and immediately wanted to ride it. Then, in a northeastern forest, she somehow challenged herself to an outdoor hot spring in temperatures around minus 30 degrees. Every single adventure followed the same pattern. Every time, she marched in like a warrior heading into battle. Then, right before going in, she'd suddenly start begging me for help, and when she finally came out, she'd be freezing and sniffling before crawling straight into my coat. Looking back now, those memories are honestly hilarious. But then we entered a true wilderness. A massive wild boar suddenly appeared, its tusks jutting forward as it blocked the path. I barely had time to react, yet Li Mingyue had already pulled out her phone, preparing to take a picture. She excitedly said, "Look! It's not even that big. It probably isn't dangerous." Then she actually took 2 steps toward it. She wanted a selfie with the wild boar. My soul nearly left my body. In that split second, I grabbed her and pulled her behind me. My voice had probably never sounded this serious. "Don't move! Stay behind me!" I stared directly at the animal. My instincts were screaming. That's an adult wild boar. Those tusks can punch straight through metal. If it charges, even a tiger would think twice. Back up. Don't make a sound. Don't let it think we're a threat. Li Mingyue was completely frozen. She stared at me. Her eyes were filled with shock, relief, and something else I couldn't quite understand. The wild boar seemed to sense the tension between us. It snorted twice. The wild boar finally snorted twice and disappeared into the forest. I let out the breath I'd been holding. Only then did I realize my entire back was soaked with sweat. After that little near-death experience, Li Mingyue became noticeably quieter. She stayed half a step behind me wherever we went. And the way she looked at me was completely different from before. That's when I suddenly realized something. Our relationship had quietly changed while neither of us was paying attention. I was no longer merely her bodyguard or her contract boyfriend. Somehow, I had become something closer to the person responsible for keeping her safe. Once we finally recovered from that close call, the car eventually rolled to a smooth stop outside the mansion. By then, I was completely awake and clear-headed. I tightened my grip around the red marriage certificate. Then I stepped out of the car with Li Mingyue. I'd lived in this place for 3 years. Yet somehow, walking back in today felt completely different. For 3 years, this had been her mansion and my workplace. But from today onward, this was our home. That thought still had my brain in knots. I pushed open the front door and stopped dead. The main lights were off, but candles flickered across the dining table. An entire spread of carefully prepared dishes covered the table, and beside them stewed a bottle of liquor whose name I couldn't even recognize. The whole setup was so elaborate that I immediately turned toward Li Mingyue. She slipped off her high heels, then walked straight toward me, and on her face was the softest smile I'd ever seen from her. Today's when our real life together begins. We should celebrate. She gestured toward the dining table. The hotel already handled everything. You're off duty tonight. My heart skipped a beat. For 3 years, I had always been the one testing her food for poison and taking the alcohol she shouldn't drink. This was the first time. She had prepared a meal specifically for me. Sure, she'd ordered it rather than cooked it, but somehow, that didn't make the gesture any less meaningful. Under the candlelight, her face looked unusually gentle. For the first time, I realized that this woman who seemed invincible against the entire world actually had a soft side. We sat across from each other. The atmosphere suddenly felt strangely intimate. She poured me a glass of liquor. Try some of my private collection. I raised the glass. We clinked glasses. The clear sound echoed through the quiet room. The liquor was brutally strong, burning all the way down. But the thing making my heart race had absolutely nothing to do with the alcohol. 3 years of memories flashed through my mind like scenes from a movie. From signing that ridiculous contract the first time I stepped in front of her. From pretending to be her boyfriend. To this very day, when a gold-stamped marriage certificate sat in my hand. The whole thing felt like the most absurd dream imaginable. What are you thinking about? Li Mingyue suddenly broke my train of thought. Were you thinking about that 6 million settlement? Is that really all you can think about? Without even thinking, I answered her. Li Mingyue. She grabbed something nearby and lightly smacked me with it. Shenjiao, can you have a little more ambition? I could only grin awkwardly. I took another sip, suddenly unsure what to do with myself. Eventually, we finished the meal while trading half-serious, half-joking remarks. It was getting late. We went off to clean up. After taking a shower, I instinctively headed toward my old bedroom. My hand had barely touched the doorknob when I heard her voice behind me. I turned around and found Li Mingyue leaning against the master bedroom doorway. She had just showered. Her hair was still slightly damp. Her cheeks carried a faint flush. I couldn't tell whether it came from the steam or from something else. Today is when we really start. We've already been sleeping together for so many nights, so let's stop sleeping in separate rooms. Her words were like a pebble tossed into still water. Except the splash in my heart was more like a tidal wave. The air around us suddenly felt scorching hot. I looked at her. She looked right back at me. 3 years of living side by side, and countless moments when our lives had hung by a thread. All those nights we'd been forced to share a bed. All that pent-up tension finally turned into an impulse I could no longer suppress. I slowly walked toward her. stopping directly in front of her. Then I quietly closed the master bedroom door behind us. That night somehow felt both impossibly long and strangely short. Later, I held her as she slept peacefully in my arms. My heart was a complete mess. But for the first time, I understood something clearly. 3 years together. Pretending there are no feelings between us would have been a lie. Habit really was terrifying. Without either of us noticing, this woman had already spread into every corner of my life. I'd even started thinking that this damn peaceful life was actually pretty incredible. A wealthy wife, a luxury mansion, and no more need to fight every day just to survive. Wasn't this exactly the stable life I'd dreamed about for years? Yet there was still one question I couldn't shake. Why had she chosen me in the first place? Lying there beside her, surrounded by warmth, I finally started wondering whether I'd been missing something obvious all along. Morning sunlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, casting a bright column across the room. Tiny specks of dust floated lazily through the light. I lowered my eyes and saw Li Mingyue sleeping peacefully beside me. Her long eyelashes looked like 2 tiny fans. Her breathing was calm and steady. There was even a faint smile at the corner of her lips. She looked almost like a sleepy cat, curled comfortably against me. The feeling was completely different from the chaos I'd known when we first met. Back then, everything was just work. A contract. A job I was getting paid to perform. But now, she was my wife. I couldn't help reaching out. I gently brushed the loose strands of hair away from her face. And then the question that had haunted me for 3 years suddenly came rushing back. Almost without thinking, I asked her. My voice was barely a whisper, as though I was afraid to disturb the peaceful moment. Why did you choose me back then? Her eyelashes fluttered. Then she slowly opened her eyes. There wasn't even a trace of sleepiness in those clear eyes. Instead, there was a mischievous glint. You want the real answer? She shifted closer against me, finding an even more comfortable position. You want the truth? It was because I saw how you handled that bald client back then. You had the kind of decisiveness and style that matched mine. That's not what I want to hear. She went silent for a moment. Then she buried her face against my chest. Her voice came out muffled. Fine. The real reason is, I just thought you were incredibly attractive. My heart skipped a beat. Just think of it as love at first sight. Boom. My brain practically shut down. It felt like someone had detonated a depth charge inside my skull. Those 4 words, love at first sight, from a woman who ruled the business world with an iron fist, a woman feared by countless people, coming straight out of her mouth. Hit me harder than a nuclear blast. I had always believed I was simply the most practical tool she could find, after weighing all her options. Just a mercenary willing to risk his life for money. But apparently, that wasn't the whole story. And those 3 years of pretending to be a couple, they were when I finally confirmed that my first impression was right. Absolutely right. Her voice still sounded muffled against my chest. Actually, 3 years ago, when we signed the contract, I already told you. I said it was more than just an employment contract. It was also my test to find out whether you could be my partner. If you turned out to be the right person, we'd stay together. You really didn't hear that part, did you? The moment she said that, images from 3 years ago flashed through my mind. Back at her private club, I had been staring at that contract, and all I could see were those beautiful numbers. 1 million a year. 3 million after 3 years, plus another 3 million in total settlement. 6 million altogether. Back then, my brain was so focused on counting the money that I wouldn't have heard anything else, even if she'd shouted it. I could only give her an awkward, embarrassed smile. Yeah, I really didn't hear that. Back then, all my attention was glued to the salary figures in front of me. The woman in my arms suddenly lifted her head. She glared at me with an expression that was both annoyed and amused. Then she clenched her fist and thumped my chest several times. Money, money, money! You're hopeless! No wonder, when we went to register our marriage, you thought I was trying to dodge your settlement. She kept pounding my chest until it practically went numb. I couldn't help laughing. I eventually drifted back to sleep with a smile on my face. Morning sunlight slipped through the gap in the curtains. It scattered golden patches of light across the blankets. At some point, the woman in my arms had already woken up. She was idly brushing the ends of her hair, back and forth across my chin. I opened my eyes and found Li Mingyue staring at me with sparkling eyes. There was a playful, almost mischievous smile in them. She looked completely refreshed. Her cheeks were rosy, almost glowing. There wasn't a trace left of the ruthless woman who used to thrive on the edge of danger. The feeling was nothing like my old life as a night watchman. Back then, every morning meant another mission. Another assignment. Now, this woman beside me was my wife. Sleepyhead, time to get up! She leaned down. Her warm breath brushed against my ear. Her voice was soft and gentle. Let's go on our honeymoon. My brain was still somewhere between sleep and reality. I didn't react at first. Honeymoon? She was already out of bed before I could process the word. Her efficiency was terrifying. She immediately started packing our luggage. It was the full business queen mode I knew so well. What's the rush? We're already legally married. Why wouldn't we leave as soon as possible? As she spoke, she casually picked up her phone. Then she called her younger brother right in front of me. My heart immediately skipped. Why was she calling Li Xingchen this early? He answered almost instantly. Li Mingyue didn't waste even half a second on small talk. She went straight for the biggest bombshell possible. From now on, the company is temporarily your responsibility, together with the board. My eyelid twitched. I'm going on my honeymoon with your favorite brother-in-law. And I'm going to deal with the family's little problems while I'm away. I nearly choked. I almost swallowed my own saliva. I'm literally sitting right here. What exactly do you mean by deal with the problem? She really had no filter whatsoever. My entire face instantly turned bright red. My heartbeat went insane, pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then I heard a burst of laughter I'd never heard before. Her brother was absolutely losing it. You really are shameless. You finally figured it out. Li Xingchen sounded so excited that his voice nearly cracked. Go. Just go already. Don't worry about the company. I've been waiting for a chance to step in anyway. He paused. His voice was practically overflowing with anticipation. You two just focus on your honeymoon. Whatever mess is waiting at home, we'll deal with it after you come back. Oh, and brother-in-law, you'd better keep an eye on my sister. Don't let her do anything reckless again. I lay there listening to this completely unfiltered brother-to-brother-in-law conversation. For a moment, I felt like some kind of product being publicly handed over. Yet beneath the embarrassment, a strange warmth spread through my chest. Because this wasn't an act. It was genuine excitement from a younger brother who truly wanted his sister to be happy. And more importantly, it was the most direct acceptance I'd ever received as her husband. That feeling of finally being accepted erased the last bit of uncertainty I'd been carrying because of our old contract. Every remaining doubt simply disappeared. Li Mingyue ended the call. She looked ridiculously pleased with herself. Then she raised an eyebrow at me. That smug little expression made her look like a cat that had just stolen something. See, my brother is even more eager for our honeymoon than we are. She walked over to the bed, then leaned down to look at me. Her finger traced a playful line across my chest. You'd better step up. Otherwise, when it comes to Lu Ruyan, I'll still need you to clean up the mess. That sweet little threat left me completely speechless. I immediately grabbed her wandering hand. I grabbed her wandering hand and pulled her straight into my arms. Then I rolled us over and pinned myself above her. I looked down at her. Her lips slightly parted in pure surprise. I leaned closer and quietly asked, "Where do you want to go?" My sudden move clearly caught her completely off guard. Then she suddenly laughed. She wrapped both arms around my neck. "Wherever you want to go." I looked out at the bright sunlight streaming through the window. And suddenly, I remembered a dream I'd carried since I was a kid. A dream that once felt impossible back when my world was nothing but gunfire and danger. I want to see snow. And not long after, an endless world of pure white suddenly appeared before my eyes. The sight hit me so unexpectedly that I was completely stunned. An icy wind blasted straight into my face. The cold air carried that unmistakable scent of winter. The snow beneath my boots was thick and powdery. Every step made a satisfying crunch. Li Mingyue wore a fluffy winter hat, a bright red down jacket, and followed directly in my footprints. She had the sweetest smile on her face. Against the white snow, she looked like a tiny flame burning in a frozen world. For once, I completely let myself go. I ran through the snow, rolled around like a kid, and even started launching snowballs at trees. After exhausting ourselves, we found a scenic overlook and sat down. I looked around. The ski resort was packed with people. Skiers in brightly colored outfits were flying down the slopes from every direction. The entire place was bursting with energy. I watched those skiers racing downhill. And without thinking, I muttered, "Wow. So many legs." I didn't even say it loudly. It was just a completely brainless observation. Unfortunately, I had forgotten who was sitting right beside me. A wave of killing intent instantly crawled up my spine. The temperature around us somehow felt 10 degrees colder. I slowly turned my head. And there it was, the utterly frozen expression of Li Mingyue. The smile had vanished from her face without a trace. In its place was that terrifying expression I knew all too well. The cold, ruthless gaze of the Li family matriarch. "What did you just say?" Her voice was soft, but it sliced into my ears like an icicle. I didn't even have time to react. One delicate hand shot toward me like lightning. She grabbed my ear with frightening precision, then twisted it a full 360 degrees. A wave of agonizing pain exploded through my skull. I nearly saw the afterlife on the spot. Wife, I'm sorry." "Ow, that hurts. Please say it again." There wasn't even a hint of emotion in her voice. My brain went into emergency survival mode. My survival instinct had never activated this hard in my entire career. Snow! I said, "There's so much snow." I pointed dramatically at the endless white landscape in front of us. I made my expression as sincere as humanly possible and turned my voice up to maximum convincing power. "Wife, you definitely heard me wrong. Look how white the snow is. Look how clean it is." The pressure on my ear finally loosened a little. Li Mingyue narrowed her eyes suspiciously. She looked at me like a detective interrogating a criminal. "You'd better have been talking about the snow." Then she finally let go. But she gave me a warning cold enough to freeze my blood. I immediately started rubbing my poor, abused ear and nodded like a machine. Definitely the snow. Absolutely the snow. I swear on everything holy, I put on the most righteous expression I could manage. Desperate to prove my innocence, I launched into an enthusiastic review of the scenery. "Wife, look how much snow there is. Look how fresh the wind feels. Look how blue the sky is." Then my eyes drifted toward a group of women nearby. They were wearing tight-fitting ski outfits. Unfortunately, my mouth was faster than my brain. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Those legs are pretty." The instant I finished speaking, the entire world went silent. I slowly looked at Li Mingyue's eyes. They had narrowed into something genuinely dangerous. Oh no. My body reacted before my brain could even process the situation. I turned and ran. "Shen Xiao!" Li Mingyue's furious shout exploded behind me. I didn't dare look back. I sprinted through the snow like my life depended on it. I used every ounce of speed I had accumulated over my entire life. "Stop right there! Say that again?" She chased after me, breathing hard, while I kept running and glancing back. With the freezing wind blasting across my face, I shouted at the top of my lungs. "No matter how white it is, it still can't compare to you." Several years later, on one quiet afternoon, the sunlight was warm and perfect. A gentle breeze drifted through the yard. Li Mingyue and I were curled up together on the sofa. She rested against my shoulder, holding a peeled orange in her hand. She slowly fed me one slice at a time. I looked out into the courtyard and saw a tiny figure in a little vest, with a tiny ponytail, running after a husky as fast as her little legs could carry her. For a moment, I found myself lost in thought. I remembered how all of this had started. I remembered that night at the Civil Affairs Bureau. And I remembered the man I used to be. The shameless money addict whose head was filled with nothing but that 6 million settlement. I couldn't help letting out a quiet laugh. "What are you laughing about?" Li Mingyue asked. Then she popped another half-peeled orange slice directly into my mouth. It was sweet, with just a hint of sourness. I chewed the orange, then answered, with my mouth still full. "I was thinking that if I'd really taken that money and run back then, wouldn't I have regretted it for the rest of my life?" Li Mingyue rolled her eyes at me, but the corner of her mouth couldn't stop curling upward. "You're only realizing that now?" "Too late. You're stuck with me for the rest of your life." She leaned closer against my chest as she said it. I smiled, she smiled, and our clasped hands tightened unconsciously. Then came a little voice from the yard. "Mom! Dad!" Our daughter was holding a snowball in both hands. She came running toward us on tiny legs, bursting with excitement. "Look! I made a giant snowball!" She proudly held it up in front of us, as if she'd just discovered some legendary treasure. Frozen inside the snowball was a perfectly intact fallen leaf. There were even 2 little stones beside it. Together, they looked like a tiny family of 3 standing side by side. Our daughter's little face was filled with anticipation. We should plant it in the ground. Do you think it will grow snowflakes next year? 1 for each of us, okay? I gently ruffled my daughter's hair. Time hadn't erased the scars and hardships we'd gone through together. Instead, it had transformed them. Like the light trapped inside that snowball, slowly melting the ice and filling our lives with warmth.